It's no secret that I'm not the biggest Persona fan in the world, so when Metaphor ReFantazio was first announced, I'll be honest, it kind of flew under my radar. But one game changed all of that, and I now can't stop playing it. Allow me to reiterate, I said I wasn't the biggest Persona fan in the world. I am, however, a massive SMT fan, loving SMT5 Vengeance in particular. So after playing that, my interest in Metaphor ReFantazio was certainly reignited. Upon starting the demo, which is of course the first time I'd had a chance to try anything to do with Metaphor ReFantazio, I was posed with a question from the game itself, asking if I felt fantasy could extend beyond the realms of imagination. And I found myself answering no. I think that it would be confined to the restrictions of your imagination, which is strange. And I found myself questioning why I answered that way. So the fact that it did that before I'd even started playing was a really interesting thing to me. So if you haven't tried the demo yourself already, and as I say, I've been playing it a lot in the past few days, it's huge. It lasts at least 5, 6, 7 hours. And you can continue your save on to the main game when it fully releases after you finish playing through the demo, which I really love with JRPG style games in particular, because the beginning of these games tends to drag on quite a lot. So the fact that I'm already invested in the game because I've played the demo is the hallmark of a great demo. I found the settings and the character design in Metaphor to be far more appealing to me personally than any Persona game has presented previously. I really enjoy the Persona meets Fire Emblem medieval vibe that the game gives off, while also still hinting at the kind of philosophical nature that the SMT games and Persona themselves have kind of given before. Like the fantasy book that you're presented at the beginning of the game presents a world that looks very, very eerily similar to our own, and there's a lot more references. So if you've played the demo and you know what the monsters in this game are referred to, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And I found that juxtaposition of fantasy and reality actually a really interesting way to kind of dive into a new experience. And while we're on character designs, the art in this game fills me with joy, so much joy. Just seeing some of the characters presented, like Luis, just the villain. I know it's really obvious that Joe likes the villain, shock horror, but it gave me just Ayami Kojima vibes, which is tingling all the right sensations for me, and all of the characters across the board look stunning. In fact, I liked Luis so much that I drew him, because of course I did. He's that kind of character. He's exactly my kind of character. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see this appear on my Etsy store, or any other Metaphor characters that you think I might like to draw. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll leave a link to the Etsy store in the description box as well, where there's lots of other prints that you can get hold of if you want to support the channel further. I think the thing that impressed me most with Metaphor ReFantazio, beyond the obvious things like the art style, the characters, the story, the like typical gameplay, is the quality of life that this game infuses into a classical JRPG formula. The way in which it incorporates real-time action, where it is only really used to give you an advantage or to outright defeat weaker enemies, means that it doesn't interrupt the flow of gameplay, which, when we go back to classic JRPGs, even Persona games, the fact that we're kind of like stop, start, stop, start, stop, start is a lot of what puts people off games like JRPGs, or traditional ones at the very least. So to see Metaphor kind of get it and understand how to speed that process up without actually interrupting the flow of the game, I found really impressive. So within the lengthy demo that you get with Metaphor, you'll get to dive into the archetype system, which is this game's job system. And I was really impressed with this too. You get a hint pretty early on as to what the different archetypes of archetype might be. So your typical healers, warriors, knights, etc. But there's quite a lot to them, and there's a lot of growth to be made through them. And this is the other thing I really like about the Metaphor game, where I didn't get on with it so much with Persona, is that I felt like the social link aspect of the game would be more rewarding to me personally than it would have been in Persona. In Persona, it felt like the reward for doing them was the lore behind the characters themselves. Yes, there were some gameplay tie-ins. There were obviously true endings at stuff that were tied into it, but I never felt very rewarded by doing them, where a lot of people do, so I'm not saying that it's a bad system by any means. But with Metaphor, I felt like the evolutions of the archetypes and that carrot on a stick that's always making me go, oh, I want to see what comes out of this from a gameplay perspective. I want more. I just want more. One thing I like about the Atlas formula of JRPG, so SMT and Persona, and by extension Metaphor, is the fact that you do actually have to think a lot when you go into combat. Even the regular enemies pose a challenge, at least on the normal to harder difficulties. Not enough that it's frustrating, but enough that makes you go, actually, I need to pay attention to what I'm doing here. Like, are my characters in the correct row? Which is a mistake that I made against one of the early bosses, not knowing you could switch rows because I don't pay attention sometimes. Or the fact that you need to have elemental weaknesses available because it allows you to take more turns than you would have done normally, because it's got a similar system to the SMT games through the press turns. And you get more turns if you hit with criticals, that kind of thing as well. It just all gelled really nicely. And there was a spectacle aspect to it too, through the synthesis attacks, which, kind of like Chrono Trigger, allows you to have two characters act at once, and it combines their archetypes or jobs into a singular attack that makes it into something flashier and something that has a greater effect, but it takes the turns of both characters. So there's a lot of risk and reward present in Metaphor that I was really impressed with. One thing that I would say to Metaphor's detriment, however, is despite the stellar art direction of the character design and the backgrounds, all of that, it's not the best looking game from a technical standpoint. I've definitely seen this game running on Steam decks, etc., and it not performing particularly well, even on PCs that should absolutely be able to handle a game that looks like this. I played the game on PS5 and I didn't notice huge amounts of frame drops or anything, but what I did notice was the character models aren't the most expressive in the world. Like, even when there are some major things happening on the screen, I would have expected there to be a bit more animation in the faces, and for want of a better term, at times at least, the characters looked a little bit dead behind the eyes, for want of a better term, and I don't know how I get on with that, especially when it's put up against this stellar art direction. It's certainly not something that detracted from the game too heavily for me though, certainly not against that soundtrack. The soundtrack is beyond, it's so good, it's got such a unique flavour for it, up against the modern twang of the Persona franchise. And this might be a bit of a controversial take because I know that people who love Persona really love the UI from it. But in Metaphor, it almost feels like it's gone too far in that direction a little bit, where it's a bit too in your face. Like, it's beautiful, it is. Like, in stills, it looks fantastic. But when you're taking it amongst the gameplay, the flashiness of the moves that you're doing, and then the UI is really loud, and then everything is really loud, but the game's colour palette is more subdued. It feels kind of at odds with itself. Like, it wants to be different, but it wants to make sure it definitely keeps those Persona fans engaged. So there's just so much going on, and sometimes it's hard to know where to look. As far as the story is concerned, obviously we have only played up to the first 5 or 6 hours of the game, and I won't go into too much detail about the story itself because I really do think you guys should play the demo yourself, but it definitely presents some interesting ideas, at the very least, like equality, race. I think there's a tinge of sexuality in there as well, which is a very interesting thing, because I think that all of those things are things that Persona does not handle very well, and kind of like the seeds they're sowing with Metaphor, but I'm gonna need to see where it goes. I don't know if this affects you as much as it does me, but one of the things that warded me away from Persona, at the very least, was the time constraint aspect to it. The fact that you feel like you're constantly having to do everything there and then, or you'll miss stuff. And I really hope that that isn't as strict when it comes to Metaphor, because it's something that I really struggle with. The time management aspect of Persona is a scary thing. The visual design is gorgeous, the characters are engaging, the combat is interesting and different, the quality of life aspects that make me think other JRPGs should follow these trends because they increase the flow of games like these so well that I want to see it in everything. All of these aspects really make me want to just keep playing Metaphor. And I've gone through the demo twice now, and I will happily go through it a third time just so that I can dive into the weeds of how to perfect things, what the player agency is like, how many different choices I could make. And the fact that we've only been given a small sliver of what's to come and seeing how far out this is going to go, I'm in. So that's all for my little preview on the demo for Metaphor ReFantazio before the main game comes out in October. Very much encourage you to try it. I'm sure many of you have already. So if you have, please do leave a comment below and let me know what you think of Metaphor ReFantazio. And also I'm curious as to whether you were fans of the Persona series and the SMT games before trying Metaphor or not. Because as someone who likes one half and not the other, this has definitely gripped me in ways that I wouldn't have expected, so I'd love to hear from you as well. And if you're not sure what to comment, just type the word algorithm, because it is really helpful to me as a content creator. If you've liked what you've seen here today, then do comment or like and subscribe and all that stuff that YouTubers tell you to do. And do excuse the fact that there may be a bit of an echo in my video today, because as you can probably see, I've changed which room I'm in. The room I was in before got so hot that while testing Final Fantasy 16 on my PC, it exploded a little bit, so we had to change things over. So I will be treating this room for soundproofing and making sure that the quality of the videos that I bring to you guys is of the utmost quality. So thank you very much for your patience in that regard. And if you would like to support the channel further, as I said earlier, I do have a link to my Etsy store for art prints in the description box below. And I do also have a Patreon that you can join up with, where I send a printout on a mailing list through the Patreon. And I also give other benefits like early access videos and all sorts of things like that. So if you decide to do that, thank you very much for doing so. And if you just wanted to watch today, thank you very much for watching as well. I shall love you leave it with that. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Take care.